Alright, so today we'll do just a quick video. This is the 63 Cadillac. I think I'd shown this before. We'd cleaned up the whole back end. This is where most of the rust was. Frame's been painted so far. Here's what we're doing to the bottom. Now the bottom of this car was nice. It had some kind of gray finish. So we're doing what they call an E-coat, which is a little bit lighter, but it is what it is. You can see here, Cadillac had places where they did like a undercoating. Most of it was intact. There was a few spots where we cleaned it up. And you can see how the black goes about halfway down the panel. Come over to this side. We did the same thing. And what I did, after we painted everything, cleaned it all up, we put it back and we went just a wee bit wider than what Cadillac had done. For instance, up here where it's smoother at the top, well, that's the modern stuff. So we just kind of cleaned it up. There's really no rust anywhere under this car other than a bit of surface. It's like clean and shoot, which is kind of cool. Well, got a little bit of gray paint on the frame there, touching up something, I guess. But yeah, so we went ahead and did the diff. The exhaust we're not doing. If a guy wants that cleaned up, they can put a new exhaust on or whatever, but shocks are okay. Again, I'm not restoring those. We're just basically doing the frame and some of the parts in black. We'll E-coat the bottom of the car with that gray stuff. And anyway, that's what we're doing. And I just happen to be taking a break from something else today. I'm just going to lock the camera in here. You get real close, you can see there's all this crackle. Let me see if I can bring this right up. So here you see this old lacquer primer. So what had happened, this is the original color of the car, that gold taupe, whatever that color was. But then there's this fairly thick gray primer, then a white paint job, and then the pink paint job was like a scuff and shoot. You can kind of see that here where the pink was just over the white. They didn't even pull the trims or nothing. Now the white was probably done right, because I know the guy that owned it when it was done. The problem is it was done in the 80s. The pink was added in the 90s, and again, it's so dull, and this was a car that was mostly inside. It had never been plated. So it was just part of somebody's collection. So let me see if we can get you real close. So people like to talk about the importance of different primers, right? And why we don't use the old school primer. Look how smooth that is. Here you can see there was primer work here, and it's basically shrunk and cracked, and it printed to the paint on the outside. And you see up here how it looks darker. Well, that's because it's thin. It probably just goes to the gold, and it's probably just scuffed. Now there was nothing wrong with that, right? Now keep in mind, this was a paint job that was done in like 1981 or something like that, 80, 81, from what the guy could recall. So the upside, imagine how fast this car is going to strip off. And what you're seeing me do right here. Now the trick to this, never flip it around, even though you think, oh, it gets dull, just change the blade. It will shape to one side. What I like to do is come back here and shave off the corners a little bit round, just because you don't want them digging in and scratching in. And I bet you couple people in less than an afternoon, you could probably strip all basically the two paint jobs. And what's allowing us to do this is this lacquer primer. It's soft and doesn't even look scuffed, but you can't go by that because maybe it melted a bit when the paint was put on, you know what I mean? So it's hard to say what actually happened. But as far as the white paint job and then the pink paint job, I'm literally going to strip the whole car this way. And if there's places that fight me, I'm just going to leave those spots and continue on. And then we can sand those off or deal with them different. Like here, there was a pin broke off from an emblem. But big chips, look, it doesn't make a lot of dust. I know people talk about aviation stripper, and it has its place. But in my opinion, it just, these things are a mess, right? It's like that wet blasting. If you check out my friend Pete's videos, well, he's got a few on that water blasting, and it's not a bad thing, but you got to be careful with the mess, right? Like where I live, I can have a guy come up from the city. It's about 2 hours away, but he'll come up, and a couple of years ago when I priced it was about $1,000 for the day. But he'd come up if I had the car set up on blocks outside, and he'd water blast a whole vehicle, strip everything down. Well, you're going through gallons and gallons and gallons of water, and I forget how many bags of sand he said. It was a lot. Well, you're going to make this slurry mud, right? Where's that going to go? And do I want to deal with it? Look, I can sweep the chips up, shop vac, broom, right? Whatever. And never have to worry about some kind of weird muddy slurry, and you know, where's all the sand and muck going? Does it run out in the rain and end up in my neighbor's driveway or something like that, right? So now what I'm doing doesn't work on every vehicle, but it does work on some. And this primer's pretty thick, and this doesn't seem to be overly scuffed. I mean, you can kind of see scuff marks in it. You probably can't catch it on the camera, but like I say, I think it might have been, but then you put stuff on and then more stuff, and then the reducers, like depending on whatever paint, it might have melted, say the primer anyway. If it looks a little shiny, it's because they put the primer on. But I mean, they might have used it like a sealer. It's hard to say what they did a long time ago. But this is just an old blade I had sitting around, right? So it's definitely not the sharpest. But you're going to get these spots like that anyway, whether it's sharp or not, where it's just going to basically say, nah, man, I'm not going anywhere, right? So and I mean, I've taken really, really flexible scrapers and ran them on a whetstone, like a grinder, and turned it into a razor. They're pretty good. The thing that's bad with these is the paint goes inside the crack with the blade and eventually spreads them, and then you throw these away and have to buy new ones. But yeah, if you got to push too hard, just kind of stop, because you know you could be catching on something. But I mean, you can totally see that this isn't really going to take too long. And it's totally going to ruin these handles, which, see, because it keeps, that's what happens, right? It jams up in there, which is why sometimes a scraper blade might be the better way to go. Because you can kind of just keep going and going, right? Where I can do that with this, but if I put a little bit, just the right angle and a little bit of pressure, and it'll just keep going, but it'll all pile up in here and get wide, and you know, you kind of wreck the tool. But go to the hardware store, they're a couple bucks each, and wreck them, use them, right? Never go in too straight, because you don't want to gouge it. You just want to kind of glide between the two layers. Now, it's an easy, clean way of doing something. If you have major time constraints, like I say, I've done now, actually I did a white Cadillac that had some kind of crappy acrylic paint job. It was like a 86, 87 coupe deville two-door, and I literally used this on the hood and the trunk lid, and then the rest of the car we sanded. But it was way more stable than this. Now, it doesn't want to come off as easy here as it did here, because back here is where that primer was really, really thick, and it was kind of failing. So Could also be that my blade's already getting dull, because it doesn't take much. And keep in mind, if you gouge stuff, and like I'm holding it like super light, because anything you gouge or anything like that, you're gonna have to deal with, especially if you're not gonna be epoxying the whole car and stuff like that. You know, if you were doing the at-home thing and some spray bombs and a quick paint job, if you gouge it, you gotta go in there and be real dainty and fix every little gouge. So this may work on the whole car, it may only work on parts of the car, but I can tell you it's already getting harder down here. Like it's, oh, maybe. And then sometimes you come back at it and it comes right off, so I'm not sure about that, but could even be that the blade's a little bit on the dull side. But the whole idea is you just go real easy. This is probably not the way to do anything, but again, it works. There's not a lot of dust. See, so what's happening is when I finally get it to move, it goes under here and then stops. So I might actually try that. Maybe I'll take a couple scraper blades. Luckily me, I've got like a motorized water wheel for sharpening stones really, really sharp. So what I'll do is I'll grind it first. Yeah, see, I don't think that's white paint. There might have been something going on here with a bit of fill, but well, maybe not. Seems the white paint job was fairly thick. Like this pink paint job, you can take right off the white. But I can tell you, I think that was sanded properly. Where this, actually, there's lines right in there. And these are deep. So, yeah, people tried to do some kind of a job. And again, painted in 80, 81, so how good was it? Well, it was good enough that someone put another paint job on top of it, and we're talking 40 years later, I'm peeling it off, right? So, but I don't know. If anyone wants to comment on what they would do, strip this whole car down. I'm not going to sandblast it. And I'm not going to water blast it. But if anyone has any tips or tricks or anything, I'd be willing to try just about anything. Sometimes you go on a bit of a 45 like so and it'll keep creeping, but you do need a point for that, and like I say, the point's kind of jagged, so you sort of don't want that either. Anyway, this is a boring video probably to watch. Scrape and paint, right? But this is pretty smooth. So like if I took a sander now, this will sand right off. Like this primer will come off in seconds, I think. For instance, here's the block with some 400 grit. You can already see the gold all coming through. Then you're going to find yourself with the next question. Let's say you successfully do this everywhere on the whole car, right? See what I mean? Now if you do this to the whole entire car, the question is, do you take the gold off too? And again, this depends on what your intentions are. Like I've had cars with 3-4 paint jobs on them over the years. Not that I did, but like cars that I've bought or I've worked on. And the paint is so thick, there's so many mils. Sorry about that, we'll pull you back a bit. There's so many mils on it that the whole thing is failing and coming right off of the metal. But in a lot of cases, there'll be a bunch of swirl and whatnot. So you know that somebody's already kind of taken it to the metal at some point and redid everything. You really got to watch on these angles not to gouge the crap out of those if you're doing it this way. You know, just because, again, more junk to fix later. And I find with the new aviation strippers, they're not like the old stuff used to be. So you used to put it on and give it 10-15 minutes and it'd just melt, and then you could go with a scraper and scrape it right to the metal. Even the furniture stripper would do that with various products. But the stuff now, people are saying, oh, sand it with like 40 grit to put a heavy scratch and then put it on so it has something to get in. But I mean, the products are just very subpar, to say the least. And they probably pulled out some kind of poison or some kind of chemical that, you know, bad for us or bad for the environment, bad for something. Or they just don't want it to work, as some people definitely would say. But whatever the case may be, yeah, see, you start to get a run, it goes in there and kind of stops you. So that's the only downside with these. See, I'm getting impatient. I probably shouldn't, because when you kind of do the wiggle, you got to be careful, or it'll excuse me, it'll start to dig, and we don't want that. See that brown? That's not digging. That's between the white and the gold. So that means he's got this gray primer in places, which was likely is that ever thick? It's probably a bit of some kind of real old filler primer, or they just used a lot. But then there's red oxide in other places. So yeah, that's exactly what it is. And that red oxide primer is a lot tougher than this soft stuff. Well, that could be a bummer. Might not strip as easy as I was hoping. I have come across cars though where what I did here real fast, you could do that on the whole car. You could literally put a little bit of weight on the blade, get a nice steady motion, and walk the whole width of that blade right down the side of the car and strip it. Now in this case, I don't know if we can. Some places you could easily do it, and other places are stuck there kind of good. Some kind of crazy bright blue color in there. Who knows what that's supposed to be? But anyway, it's kind of neat just to see what's underneath. So under the gold, there seems to be some material there, but that being said, a lot of people think that there was Bondo and filler and everything used right at the factory, and there very well could have been. I mean, I'm sure there was. Excuse me. Yeah, there must have been a repair there, but this other primer, does that ever adhere well? And then you get below it where the gray primer is and it's like nothing again. But anyway, I'm going pretty light with it. I did put a little gouge in there, but it peeled out like a spot. I'm not sure if there was something there or not. But anyway, so sometimes you can strip a whole car that way. Figured we'd give it a try, but I'll give it another couple of minutes and see if I can get a quick go at it and pull big pieces off at a time. And if not, come up with a plan B. I think this car's going to be mostly sound though. It's in really good shape. I don't know if there's enough light, but there's your floors. I mean, they're basically dirty. You clean it up and it's like a dark gray coating. We've already painted the frame in most places. But yeah, see, so right near the outer edge you get a little bit of that. And then the roughness isn't so much rust, it's kind of, wonder if we can get a better look at it. Right? See what I mean? Down at the rocker, no rust. A little bit in a few spots up there. There's whatever that hanging plate is there, that brace. Some of the braces and stuff like this, you know, but when you come up under the floor, like way in there, there's a little bit. So we've been cleaning that up, put a little bit of treatment on it, and like I say, it looks like that's where there was places where Cadillac did a bit of undercoating, but they didn't do it under the whole car or even along the whole rocker. It seemed they did it at the back behind the back wheel, like I showed you earlier, and then they did it up at the front, and they come back just past the fender into the rocker on the inside and stop. And we're thinking we might continue that, clean that little edge like I showed you where the little bit of rust gathered. And once we get all that done, we're going to do the Cadillac thing where we just do a little bit of the undercoating. It's rubberized vehicle undercoating, but we're going to come right back across the whole rocker just so that that doesn't get up in there and, you know, get chipped up again. I mean, this thing probably won't ever see a gravel road anyway, but just this is kind of what the owner was sort of thinking, so that's what we'll do. Yeah, it's a pretty cool car. It had been hit at one time down in this corner and repaired, and that all rotted out, and that was back in the 70s. Like you can see the floors and everything in there are pretty good. A couple pinholes and whatnot. A couple pans. We're just going to use a few sections out of them. Worst part of the car is right here, and then the spot I showed you at the bottom of the door and front fender. Everything else is there's your door bottoms. Those holes aren't rust holes, they're shaped. But yeah, so it's a pretty cool car. Usually you pull these off and everything in behind is all rotted to hell. There's a little bit of surface up there, but I mean, it's pretty clean. Those we're gonna actually sandblast right out and get all that junk. So I'll try to keep the sandblaster from here this way. Just, you know, you don't want to wreck any metal or anything. I mean, these cars are pretty stout, but even so, I mean, there's peeling paint. There's no real rust on this car to speak of, like, so it'll be fun. 63 Coupe DeVille. Anyway, that's it for today. Cheers.